I'm the parliamentarian. I'm the parliamentarian for 3rd District PTA, and I'm delighted to see you here today to learn about bylaws and how do you update your bylaws and that sort of thing. So let me, first of all, if you would put in the chat the name of the school that you are from, I would appreciate it just for my information so I kind of get an idea of who's here, who's represented. But let me share my screen. Now I have to figure out. I don't want to share that, so I'm not sure. Okay, this is what I want to share. Very good. Eventually I will get there. So I appreciate that. And we'll get started, and feel free, I can answer questions as we go along. And there we go on that one. So again, the program's going to be recorded. You can access the recording on our 3rd District PTA website. And there will also, Tom will be posting copies of the slides, and there will be some handouts there. So you might want to check back in a few days to our website for access to this program. So today we're going to talk about bylaws. And bylaws are one of the 3 roles of the parliamentarian. And you're probably asking, well, what are those 3 roles of the parliamentarian? Well, the first one is the parliamentarian helps with parliamentary procedure at meetings. They're kind of assisting the president, keeping track of who else wants to talk about something. So you take turns, or watching if there's a motion on the floor to be sure that the president calls for a second, and that sometimes we have a motion on the floor and there's a second, and then we forget to actually vote. Yes, Meredith. Go ahead and unmute yourself and question.
Awesome. Thank you. Hi, this is actually where a lot of my questions stem from. We're fairly new in establishing ours, and our bylaws are outdated. We got them brought back to us from an older entity. And we only have a president, secretary, vice president, and treasurer at the moment. And so as a secretary, I have taken upon myself to go through and know it, just because I'm able to compare the notes and stuff. And I have some familiarity with parliamentary procedure just through my job. And that's where we're getting hung up, is there's so many jobs of the parliamentarian, but we don't have one.
And you are so right. That is one of the things that for this coming year, you might want to look around. Sometimes PTAs can convince a teacher to serve as the parliamentarian.
So we have one elected for next year.
Okay. Now, typically the parliamentarian is an appointed position, not an elected one.
Okay.
It needs to be somebody who can work well with the president. That's why it's appointed, that the president appoints somebody that they feel comfortable with. That's not going to be sitting there at meetings lecturing them. That's truly going to be an assistant kind of thing.
Okay, I think that we're good in a cohesive unit like that. I'm not worried.
Okay.
So for this year, if we wanted to update them this year, because they are horribly outdated.
Okay, that's fine.
Should I just where it says parliamentarian, just say secretary filled this role for this entity, and then the parliamentarian would move forward in it?
Sure.
Okay.
That's not a problem.
Perfect. I just want to make sure we weren't breaking the bylaws and writing the bylaws.
No, no, you're fine. You're fine.
Okay, thank you so much for that.
Okay. So the second role is the parliamentarian if you have one, advises the nominating committee. Because the bylaws tell you you're going to elect a nominating committee, and usually those individuals don't know exactly what they need to do. And so the parliamentarian, or whoever's acting as a parliamentarian pro tem, is going to show them the bylaws and show them that these are the elected positions that you need to find somebody to serve in those positions so that we can elect them. And then the third role is the parliamentarian facilitates the review and updating of bylaws. And of course, if you don't have a parliamentarian, then somebody else on the board is going to have to take over that role. And what we're focusing on today is the reviewing and updating the bylaws. So why do we have bylaws? Well, they're a required legal document for all nonprofits. So the IRS says that we have to have bylaws. The IRS says that they have to be current bylaws. Because the unit PTA at the school site level gets their nonprofit status under the umbrella of the California State PTA, the IRS allows the California State PTA to determine what current means. And so the state PTA has determined that they can be no older than 5 years. Otherwise, they're not considered current. Bylaws are a contract adopted by vote of the membership. They provide a framework for PTA purpose and mission. Bylaws establish the structure of the organization and define operational procedures. And bylaws cannot be suspended. So you can't just suspend them for a particular meeting and because you don't have a quorum present or that kind of thing. You know, you do have to follow your bylaws. So what happens if you can't find your bylaws? Which that happens all of the time. And what you're looking for, remember, is you're looking for bylaws that are fully legal. It means they have all 3 signatures back on the signature page. If you find, or if you've been handed as a new president bylaws, but there's no signatures on them, they're not legal bylaws. So you need to contact 3rd District PTA for a copy of your existing legal bylaws. You notice I use the word existing, I don't say current, because unfortunately we have a number of PTAs within 3rd District whose bylaws are 6, 7. I was even working with a PT the other day that the bylaws are 13 years old. They haven't gotten them updated, so they are way out of compliance. So contact 3rd District for a copy. You can email the office at thirdpta.org right now, and our office secretary can email you a copy. You also can email me directly, and at the end of this, there's a slide and you'll get my email address. You can contact me directly and I can email you a copy of your existing bylaws. Hopefully they're current, they're within the 5 years allotted, but if they're not, you're in the right place today to learn about how to update those bylaws. You can't contact the California State PTA to request a copy of your bylaws because they don't keep them. There are several thousand PTAs within the state of California, and so that would be an awful lot for them to keep. So you have to contact 3rd District if you need a copy of your existing bylaws. So bylaws are sort of the rules of the game for your PTA. And what do bylaws tell you? Well, first of all, they give you the legal name for your PTA. Some PTAs use initials or abbreviations, shortcuts for their PTA, and that's fine. But there are times you need to know what's the legal name of our PTA, like when you're filing taxes, when you're applying for grants, when you are asking businesses for donations and everything. It needs to be under the legal name of your full legal name of your PTA. So you look in the bylaws. The bylaws also have the ID numbers. They have your national PTA ID number. They have your California State PTA ID number. And those 2 numbers are on the front cover of your bylaws. They're also back, further back in the bylaws on a page with all of the ID numbers. Now that California State PTA ID number you need to know if you're going to register to use the special leaders website with the California State PTA. So you have to know that you're part of third district, which your bylaws tell you, and you have to know the California State ID number for your PTA. The bylaws also include your ID numbers with different governmental agencies. So they have your EIN uh, uh, with the IRS. They have your entity number with the State Franchise Tax Board, and they have your charitable trust number with the Attorney General's Office Registry of Charitable Trusts. So those are all listed in your bylaws. And you're going to need those when you're filing tax returns later on. The bylaws give you information about the board, your executive board, who serves on the executive board, what's the quorum for the board to do business, and that kind of thing. It gives you information about the elections. When are your officers elected each year? Gives you information about meetings. When are the association meetings supposed to be held? When are the executive board meetings? And it gives you about their role and things that they do. Tells you what the role of the executive board is and things. Tells you the membership information. What are you allowed, authorized, I guess is the word I want to use. What are you authorized to charge members to join your PTA? Now, that needs to be current. You can only charge for membership what is listed in your legal bylaws. So if you want to charge more for membership, the first thing you need to do before you can do that is to update your bylaws. The bylaws have information about committees, especially standing committees. Those are committees that operate all year long, and it tells you what committees you might have. And it gives you information about PTA policies, actions, and procedures that help your PTA function. Now, we said that to be current, your bylaws need to be no older than 5 years. But you can update them at any time you want. You can update them every year if you want, or every 2 or 3 years. But what's the process? Well, first of all, the president appoints a bylaws committee. Now, some PTAs, it may be that bylaws committee may be all 4 board members that they have, if that's all they have, and that's fine. If you have a parliamentarian, the parliamentarian chairs the bylaws committee. Otherwise, for an officer that's appointed to that bylaws committee will be selected to chair that committee. And the bylaws committee is going to ask, are all our unit bylaws still a good fit? Do we have the right number of officers, or do we need more to get the job done? Are there too few of us trying to do everything? What about the board? Do we have too many board members? Like, particularly, do we have too many vice presidents and maybe we need to reduce it? Or maybe do we need an additional vice president to help with the workload? And what about standing committees to help us work? We look at the bylaws committee is going to look at meetings, when they are and how many. Does that still work for our membership? And they're going to look at the dues. For our school community, are the dues that are listed in our existing bylaws, are those still the best dues for us to charge? Or maybe they're too high and they're scaring people or pricing people out of joining the PTA. And we need to reduce them a little, or maybe we want to raise them a little, and that's fine too. And they're going to look at the standing rules. Is there anything that can be added to help us work smarter? So first of all, you need to keep the bylaws current. The bylaws are the rules of the game. And if they're not current, they're not going to be helpful. And everybody needs to know what's in the bylaws. So you need to provide a copy of the fully signed bylaws to every board member. You need to review those bylaws annually. At the beginning of the year, when the new board meets, one of the first things they're going to do at that meeting is go through the bylaws, review the bylaws, so everybody knows what the rules are, what's in them. especially if you have new board members who have never actually even seen the bylaws before. The bylaws need to be updated at least every 5 years. I recommend that you update them at least every 3 years, maybe every 2 years. And one of the reasons is that the state PTA makes changes to the standard unit bylaws that become effective immediately. Well, how are you going to know what those changes are in unit bylaws if you're using an outdated version of it? So if you update your bylaws using the new template, you'll see whatever changes the state PTA may have added to those. And do remember that you can't implement changes that you might want until you've gone through the whole process of updating, getting them approved by the state parliamentarian and getting them voted on and adopted by the membership. So that key thing is just because that committee has gone through and updated the bylaws, if until they are signed by the state PTA parliamentarian, voted on at an association meeting and signed by the president and the secretary, they're not fully legal. So you need to keep your bylaws secure. You only have to share them with PTA members when requested. So you don't have to make copies and send them out to everybody who joins your PTA. But you do need to make them available if a member requests to see them. Now, the toolkit currently says that you're not allowed to post bylaws on your school website, on publicly accessible websites. I just learned yesterday that the State PTA Board of Managers at the upcoming meeting on May 2nd, 1st and 2nd, I believe it is going to be changing this policy so that you will be allowed to post them. You need to keep a copy on file in the school office. Sometimes you might be holding board meeting there. If somebody didn't bring the bylaws, a question comes up. It's nice to have a copy available to refer to. It makes it easier if a member wants to see the bylaws because you have a copy there that they can look at the school office. So for convenience, keep a copy stored there. So the majority of this workshop is going to be talking about updating our bylaws using the e-bylaws program because that's the easiest way to do it. So we're going to go through how you update your bylaws using the e-bylaws program. Unfortunately, it's available only in English, though. So if you want bilingual bylaws, you need to contact me and I can send you the fillable copy of bilingual bylaws. It's a little harder to work with. It's not as easy as the e-bylaws program. And so what I usually recommend is even if you want bilingual bylaws, you go ahead and complete your update your bylaws using the e-bylaws program, because that way you know what to put in the blanks on the bilingual program. The e-bylaws program, you don't have to know what to put in every blank. All you have to do is respond to prompted questions. Some of the questions are yes and no. Some of them are you pick one of these options. But it makes it a lot easier. And once you've answered all the questions on the e-bylaws program, then your bylaws are automatically compiled for you, which it makes it really, really, really nice. So e-bylaws in 3 steps. First thing you're going to do is you have to apply for a username and password, and we'll talk about how you do that. Once you get your username and password, you have to access the e-bylaws program, enter information or answer the questions they ask you, select the options, and then you're going to build those bylaws as the final step and save them as a PDF on your computer. And then The third thing is you're going to submit them to third district PTA for review. And then I, in turn, forward them on to the state PTA parliamentarian for her approval and signature. You don't send them directly to the state PTA. They will just forward them back to me because the state PTA parliamentarian is only one person and there are several thousand PTAs in California. So the districts have to review for errors and things first. So how do you get a password? And I'm going to do this as easy as possible. You go to the state PTA website, capta.org. If you can't remember what the website is, you can always Google California State PTA and it'll come up, and then you can click on and go to the website that way. So we're making this as simple as possible. You're going to click on PTA leaders, and that's located across the top of the screen. You're going to scroll down to run your PTA. You're going to click on bylaws and standing rules. And I'm going to, in the next screen, we're going to be going through and I'll show you what this looks like. You're going to click on the box, check out e-bylaws. And then you're going to click on the box, request username. So what does that actually look like? Well, you go to the website, capta.org. You click on PTA leaders across the top, scroll down to run your PTA, and then you go over and you find bylaws and standing rules, and you click on that. And then what's going to pop up is this screen, and you click on, well, first you're going to click on check out e-bylaws, and then you're going to click request username and password. Now, the username and password, you're going to receive that back by email, usually within 2 or 3 days. So it's a very quick process, but it's not necessarily a same day. So you kind of have to keep that in mind when you're asking for your username and password. So once you receive your username and password back, then you have to go back to the e-bylaws program and enter the information. So you're going to return to the state PTA website, click on PTA leaders at the top of the screen. So by the time we get through this, you'll all know exactly, you'll have this ingrained in your brain. Scroll down to run your PTA. Click on bylaws and click on check out e-bylaws. And this time, you're going to click the box that says access e-bylaws. So again, what does that look like? Go to the website, click on PTA leaders across the top of the screen, scroll down to run your PTA, go across to bylaws and standing rules, and click on check out e-bylaws, and then access e-bylaws. So when this screen comes up, this time you already have your username and password. So you're going to click on the access e-bylaws screen. And when you do that, first screen that comes up is this one, which is information about your unit. You can't change anything on this screen. So if you look at it and you see things that need to be updated, you need to contact me as the 3rd District Parliamentarian and let me know what changes need to be made and when they become effective. For instance, some schools, particularly elementary schools, are adding a preschool, or they're no longer have a 6th grade at their school, and the top grade is 5th grade. There's a change in grades. Yes, Meredith, go ahead, unmute yourself and ask your question.
Hi, so I am following along with you trying to get my password because e-bylaws sound amazing. And there's actually a screen between where you request it and where you can submit your request. And there's a question that says, what PTA council are you in? And I don't think I know the answer to that for myself.
You are not in a council. There are no councils in third district, so you are considered an out of council.
Thank you so much. I was just checking.
That's a good thing that you asked that question.
Okay.
So, because I'm
And
sure
it
other people
also,
will have that.
yeah, it asks for my unit number and some other stuff that I'm not totally sure I know off the top of
Okay,
my head.
look at your existing bylaws. Your unit number
Okay.
is that your unit number is your California State PTA ID number. Top right-hand corner of the cover of your bylaws.
Okay. Perfect. I will get into it. I'm excited for this program. Thank you so much.
Mm-hmm. Very good. So if you look at this screen and you see changes that need to be made, email me and let me know what changes and when those changes became effective. I will fill out a change of status form. Tom Nelson, our third district president, will sign it and I submit it to the state PTA office. They make the changes in the program. Let me know. Usually it's the very same day. And let me know. And then I let you know that the changes have been made and you can go back to the e-bylaws program with the corrected information showing. For example, one of our PTAs, the school district changed the name of the school. So the PTA wanted to update their PTA bylaws showing a legal name that was in align with the name of the school. So they had a change of name. Uh, Another school in a different school district, they just opened a new school on the same site, but it faced a different direction. So it had a different street address. So they needed to update that. So it could be various things that need to be updated. Um, Once you show everything correct, then you go on to the next screen, click on that. And what comes up is membership and dues. Now, first of all, membership is not a fundraiser. When people join your PTA, they are showing the basic level of support for your PTA, but it's not a way to raise money for your PTA to do projects and things like that. You get to choose your dues. When people are joining your PTA, though, they are automatically also joining the national PTA, and the dues for national PTA are $2.25. They're joining the California State PTA, which dues are $2, and they're joining third district PTA, and our dues are 75 cents. So if you add up national, state, and district dues, that equals $5. That's called per capita dues, but it's part of the dues you charge each member when they join your PTA. So the dues, the amount you choose needs to be $5. Usually it's a little bit higher. This PTA in this example wanted to keep their dues as low as possible, so they chose and they entered $5. So the program automatically entered then that the unit dues is going to be zero because all $5 is the per capita dues that gets passed on. I would encourage you to have a bit higher dues, typically 6, 7, 10, 15 even, some PTAs have. Now I get asked the question, well, what do usually PTAs do? The majority of our PTAs right now are charging $10 per member. Of course, that doesn't matter how many kids you have at the school, that's per adult who's joining your PTA. Or if you're a middle school or a high school, you have student members, it's those students that are joining also. So, but keep it reasonable. You don't want to price out members, parents, and things from joining your PTA, and you don't want to scare away staff by trying to charge $20 dues, and then the staff decides, well, I don't think I'm going to join the PTA if they're going to charge that much. So keep your dues reasonable. And most PTAs have determined that $10 is pretty reasonable. If you compare it to going to Starbucks, you can pay that much every day at Starbucks. And to join the PTA, you're only paying once a year to join. So if you let your membership know with that comparison, they'll consider it a fairly reasonable amount. So once you've put in the dues that you want to charge, click Save and click Next. Now you notice it says bylaws information is not complete. That means there's other screens that we're going to have to answer some questions on. So we click Next, and the screen that comes up is officers and their election. And it asks you, do you want an executive vice president? And you also notice underneath that it says number of vice presidents, and there's a red asterisk. Anytime there's a red asterisk, that is a required field that you have to enter. Now, what's the difference between an executive vice president and a regular vice president? Semantics. Some PTAs say we like the title of executive vice president. It sounds more influential because PTA does not allow co-presidents. And some PTAs say we can have an easier time finding somebody to serve as vice president if it has a more official sounding title. So they choose executive vice president. Other PTAs say, no, we don't want to call it that. We just want a regular vice president. We don't want to scare them or intimidate them with such a high sounding title. So in this case, they marked on the screen, no executive vice president, and they wanted one. They used the arrow. You can go up at those arrows and go up and down until you get the number of vice presidents you want. I do need to point out, though, if you only want one vice president, but you want that vice president to be called executive vice president, so you've clicked yes for executive vice president, then you need to, under number of vice presidents, you need to use the arrow until the numeral 0 appears. So that way you'll only have one vice president. If you put in, yes, you want an executive vice president, but you only want one, but you also put one in the number of vice presidents, when you print out your bylaws or when they're compiled, it's going to show two vice presidents. It's going to show an executive vice president and one first vice president. So that's sometimes a confusing issue. Do you want a corresponding secretary? That's the person who traditionally used to write thank you notes or send out letters asking for donations from businesses, things like that. Majority of our PTAs now are saying, no, we don't need a corresponding secretary. Usually the chairperson of event committee writes the thank yous, or the president. And keep in mind, the number of people on your executive board is going to help determine how large the quorum has to be. And that goes into effect, even if you have that position listed in your bylaws, but you don't fill it, it still counts when you're determining the quorum. So if you're not going to use a corresponding secretary, then financial secretary. Now, this is not a recording secretary, not a corresponding secretary. It has to do with money. PTAs that have taken a large amount of money sometimes want somebody to share in the work. So they have a treasurer who writes the checks and pays the bills, and they have a financial secretary who takes in the money and makes the deposits. Majority of our PTAs, though, say we just have a treasurer, one financial officer, who does both parts of the job. They both handle the deposits of the income and they pay the bills. So you don't have to have a financial secretary, but you can. Is your auditor an officer? Now, traditionally, that position was known as an officer. The terminology has been changed now to financial reviewer, but it's the same position. Do you want them to be an elected officer and vote on the executive board and have to attend the executive board meetings each month? Or are you finding it difficult to find somebody who's willing to serve if they have to come to all the meetings and you want to be able to appoint somebody? So if the executive board decides they would prefer to appoint somebody, either a volunteer or they could even hire a professional, then you would click no, the auditor or financial reviewer is not an officer. How many people on your nominating committee? It needs to be more than one, and it should be an odd number. So most PTAs choose either 3 or 5. It can be as large a number as half of the members on your executive board, but keep it reasonable and practical. So typically it's 3 or 5. You need at least one alternate because when the nominating committee is elected 2 months before the election, occasionally one of those members, something comes up in their personal life that they can't serve. And then the alternate can step in and serve on that nominating committee. Typically, PTAs only need one, but you can elect 2 if you choose. You're not going to need any more than that, though. On this screen, automatically filled in, it will show that officers assume their duties on July 1. All PTAs within 3rd District, the officers assume their duties on July 1. And that's because we want to have that agree with when your fiscal year starts. If the officers assume their duties on a different date than when the fiscal year starts, you're going to be required to have additional audits or financial reviews. And most PTAs only want to have to do the 2 that are required, one mid-year and one at the end of the year. So that's why the officers start their duties. It doesn't mean they have to do anything in July, but they are in office and officially as of July 1. Now, what about if there's a vacancy in the office of president? Who lets the board, who serves notice to the board about the notice, about the vacancy so that the board can elect a replacement? If you have an executive vice president in the normal chain of command, that's the person who would do it. So you click that. If you only have a regular vice president, you would click first vice president because that's the person who would do it. And then you click save and click on next. But you notice you can go back, so you could go back and see the previous screen if you wanted to make changes. Okay, the next one that comes up is association meetings. And I'm going to talk about this, first of all, the months. You need to have, the state PTI parliamentarian is looking for at least 4 association meetings a month, or a year, I'm sorry. The first one needs to be very early at the start of the school year because the association needs to adopt the proposed budget and the plan programs for the year before you can actually do anything. So your first one needs to be in either August or September at the latest. October is too late. So the first one should be August or September. And then you're going to enter these things going left to right, just as you would read the lines if you were reading a sentence. And the last one goes after the word and. Now, typically, a lot of our PTAs are choosing, want to go the minimal. They're choosing September, November, February, and April. So the and would be, instead of March, it would be April. Now, a lot of PTAs like to have their annual election meeting in April. The state PTA allows you to have your annual election meeting in either March or April, but April only if your association meetings are either the first week of the month or the second week of the month. So going back up to the top, you'll see in this sample, they chose to have their association meetings on the 4th week of the month. Well, that automatically required then that the annual election meeting be in March, not April. And you have to have an association meeting when you want to have your annual election. So if you want an April election, you would have to go back up in the meetings are being held on the first Thursday of the month or the second Wednesday of the month. But it'd be either the first or the second week of the month if you want an April election. How many board members do you want it to take to require the president to call a special association meeting? Now, the president can call a special meeting anytime they think it's important to necessary to do so. But sometimes things come up and the president says, I'm not going to call a meeting. I don't think we need to. But other board members think, yes, we need to call a special association meeting to talk about this. So how many board members do you want it to take to require it? It needs to be more than one, it needs to be a reasonable number. Typically, PTAs choose three as so it's no more than just two friends doing it, but it's a reasonable number. Quorum for doing business at an association meeting. The state PTA has rules on determining quorum. That's the minimum number of people that have to be present and participating at the meeting. And the state PTA's rules, and again, as I talk, don't worry about writing them down. They'll show up on the next screen. Is the quorum for an association meeting has to be the number of elected and appointed officers plus 4 or 11 is the highest number. So you have the quorum, and again, the quorum rules for association meetings, they're different than the quorums for executive board meetings. So the quorum for an association meeting is the number of elected and appointed officers plus 4 or 11, whichever is the largest. So 11 is the smallest number that the state PTA will accept for a quorum. Whoops. Okay, now, executive board meetings. And you notice there are some red outlinings on those rectangular boxes. That means there's some errors. First question, executive board meetings are going to be held on. Now, the board meetings are monthly, but you get to pick the week of the month and the day of the week. So you use that arrow and you scroll down until you come up with when you want your board meetings to be. Now, keep in mind that board meetings should be, no, I shouldn't say should, must be 2 weeks before association meetings. That allows you to have the board meeting, and then anything that you want to bring up at the association meeting allows the president to give the required legal, no less than 10 days notice to the membership over any agenda items upon which they have the right to vote. So you cannot hold your executive board meeting at 5 o'clock and your association meeting at 7 o'clock on the same day. That doesn't allow the legal notice time. So in this case, and then the next question is maximum unbudgeted bills. Now, you vote to adopt a budget at the beginning of the year, but things come up. And if you have the money, the board may say, well, yeah, we'd like to spend it on this. So the bylaws allow a maximum dollar amount that the executive board association meetings for unbudgeted items, providing you have the money. And in this case, they entered 0.00 because it has an asterisk. Well, you're required to put a dollar value in there. But again, the state PTA has some rules, so you can't put excessive amounts and things. If you're having association meetings monthly, so you're having 8+ meetings, the highest dollar amount you can put in there is $500. If you are having 5 to 7 association meetings a year, the highest dollar amount you can put in there is $750. And if you are having like just 4 association meetings a year, you can put $1,000 in there if you choose to. It doesn't mean you have to put in that highest amount. Some PTAs say, well, we're only holding 4 association meetings, but we're not comfortable with $1,000. So you put in 500 or 600 or 700, whatever dollar amount you think is reasonable for your PTA. but you can't exceed those maximum numbers. Now, again, for board meetings, the president can call a special board meeting whenever he or she thinks it's necessary. But how many board members do you want it to take to require the president to call a special board meeting? Again, it needs to be more than one, and it needs to be a reasonable number. So in this case, 3 works. Now, a quorum for executive board meetings. And you notice there's a red box around this rectangle. The state PTA's rules for determining quorum for executive board meetings is it's the number of officers plus the principal plus the teacher rep divided in 2 plus 1 to the next whole number, or 5, whichever is the larger number. So, and on the next screen, we're going to show what those quorum, that formula for determining quorum. So don't worry about writing it down. In this case, they entered the number 4 and got an error notice because the minimum number that the state PTA will accept is 5. So if you get those error notices, you can hover your mouse over it and it'll tell you what the problem is. It'll come up and show that. Now, the next box shows auditor appointment ratified in. If you said at the beginning questions that your auditor or your financial reviewer was going to be a member of your board, this rectangle will be kind of grayed out as it is in this example. If you said, no, they're not going to be a member of the board, that means the board's going to appoint them. Well, the association has to ratify the appointment of the auditor. It typically should be done before the auditor actually does their work. And the first audit or financial review is done in January. So the board's going to appoint that financial reviewer, and they're going to be ratified at an association meeting, and you're going to enter that association meeting. So typically it'll be one in the fall. If your first association meeting is August, you're probably not going to put August there because you're not going to have had time to find somebody to do this or find a professional that you want to hire. So a lot of PTAs are putting in like November if they have an association meeting in November. But again, it's your choice. Do you want executive board members to be able to meet virtually via teleconferencing? Click yes or no. I encourage you to click yes because it's always easier when the need arises to be able to do this. And if you click no, then you can't meet virtually. Doesn't mean they have to meet virtually just because you clicked yes, but it provides the opportunity if you want to do that. And then you click save and you click on the next screen. Okay, go over again the formula for a quorum. You can do a screenshot if you want to keep this quorum, but it will be available on our 3rd District website afterward too. Quorum for executive board meetings is the number of elected and appointed officers plus the principal plus the teacher representative divided in 2 plus 1 or up to the next full number, or 5, whichever is larger. Unbudgeted expenditures. Again, this is just review. If you're having 8 or more association meetings during the year, the largest number you can put in there is $500. If you're having 5 to 7 meetings, the largest number you can put in there is $750. And if you're having 4 meetings a year, the largest number you can put in there is $1,000. And the current state PTA parliamentarian is looking for 4 association meetings a year rather than just 3 that we used to have in prior years. So look for at least for meetings. Okay, the next screen that comes up is the one that asks about council membership. And you're going to ignore this screen. You notice it's kind of grayed out in those boxes because we don't have any councils in 3rd District. You are all out of council units. So you're going to just go ahead and click the next box and go on. And then it comes up with duties of officers and chairpersons. And you notice that red asterisk by the first VP shall serve as. And it comes up differently if you only have clicked that you're going to have an executive vice president. But in this case, the program was written assuming that all PTAs have at least 2 vice presidents. And so they required you to assign a duty to each of those regular vice presidents. So in this sample, you see it, they've entered event coordinator. But if you only have 1 regular vice president, just write in there aide to the president if you want to. You don't have to assign them an additional duty because their primary duty is they are the assistant to the president. So just write in there aide to the president and that takes care of it. But if you have more than 1 vice president, you will have to assign them each an extra duty. It could be event coordinator, it could be membership chair, it could be programs chair, fundraising coordinator, things like that. Now, PTA requires 2 signatures on every check. The president and the treasurer are automatically qualified as authorized as check signers. But sometimes one of them is not available. So you are allowed to have an additional 2 options as potential check signers. And you need to click at least 1 because you see that red asterisk, but you can click 2 if you want. So in this case, they did not have an executive vice president, but they had 1 vice president, so they clicked first vice president. You can, if you want an additional option, you could click financial secretary if you have 1 of those, or you could choose to click historian if you want 1 of those. That's a choice that you can have. Keeping in mind, some PTAs find it easy to find a teacher who's willing to serve as the historian. And some school districts say that teachers or staff cannot serve in any parent organization in a check signing role. So if you mark your historian as a check signer in those school districts, you may not be able to have a staff person serve in that position. So kind of keep that in mind, that you might, there are advantages in having the historian as a check signer, but there can be disadvantages also. So again, once you've done this page, you click save and you click next. And this says standing rules. Well, standing rules are procedural. They're more flexible. When those association meetings are and when the executive board meetings are going to show up in your standing rules. And another thing that shows up in the standing rules is, do you have any standing committees? You do not have to enter anything here, but you can. And if you, then you click on the add a row and then you enter the next one. And there's some samples of what you might add. And then you go on. If you get a message that says your bylaws are complete, great, you're going to be able to click this button that says bylaws and it'll build your bylaws. But if your bylaws, if you get a message where it's like it says here, bylaws information, it says complete, so I could click bylaws and build my bylaws. But if they're not complete, when I click that, I'm going to get red error messages and things. So you have to go back and fix, and you can go back previous screen and go back and fix them. Don't waste too much time. If you can't figure out what the problem is, call me. Because a lot of times I can go in I have access to the e-bylaws program for every PTA. I can see what you're seeing. And a lot of times I can figure out what the error is real quickly. Um, a lot of times this example where the executive board meetings need to be 2 weeks before, well, 2 weeks is 14 days. If you've set them up and maybe you only have 13 days between those meetings, you're going to get an error message. So often when people call me, that's the problem they couldn't figure out. If you try to print them out and you build your bylaws and you haven't solved all the error problems, you're going to get a draft watermark across each page. And you can't submit those until you fix them. So you're going to go back and you're going to look, move your mouse over the fields and figure out what the problems are and get them corrected. And then once you no longer have error messages, and instead of a not complete, you get a complete message, you can click on, instead of a draft, you'll click on the bylaws button and you'll get your bylaws. This is what they look like. Don't worry about the fact that it says 2022 on the top and this is 2024. The 2022 date refers to when the state PTA last revised the bylaws program. The date that you are looking for how current your bylaws are is the date the state parliamentarian has signed them and then you voted to adopt them. And that's back on page 15 or 16, something like that. Now, some PTAs, after they voted to adopt them, to avoid confusion, go print out the bylaws and then they go back and underneath where it says revised January 22nd, they print in adopted and the date of the meeting where you voted to adopt them. That way nobody's confused. So next step, you have to submit the bylaws to 3rd District. And you don't submit them directly to the state. So the first thing you're going to do is you're going to save those bylaws that you've built as a PDF on your computer. You're going to print them out and share those changes with your executive board, which means you're going to look at whatever your existing bylaws are and make a list of what the changes are from these existing ones. Your board approves the changes, but they're not voting on adopting the bylaws and they're not signing them. They're only approving the changes and approving them to be submitted to 3rd District to be sent on then to the state PTA parliamentarian. So you're going to need to prepare a bylaws submittal form that's found on our 3rd District PTA website under forms, but it's also found as one of the handouts. It'll be posted as one of the handouts. And you can also use the one that's found on the state PTA website. Not a problem. So what you're submitting is 2 things: the updated PDF of the updated bylaws and the submittal form. And again, you're submitting them to 3rd District, not the state PTA. You're sending them to our, as an email attachment to our 3rd District office at 3rdpta.org, or you can send them directly to me, and at the end you'll see my email. Typically, once you sent them in, they're returned within about 6 weeks. So it's not a quick overnight process. Sometimes it's faster, but sometimes it can take 6 weeks. And occasionally, if the state parliamentarian is ill or is really overloaded with bylaws coming in, it can take even longer. So after the bylaws are returned, they're returned to me, and then I forward them back to you, whoever has listed their name on that bylaws submittal form. And then they need to be adopted by your school PTA association. President needs to give at least 30 days notice to the membership regarding the meeting at which you're going to vote to adopt the updated bylaws. And the notice has to include a list of the changes that are being made in the bylaws. And they are approved by vote, a 2/3 majority vote of those present and voting to adopt. So it's not 2/3 of your entire membership. As long as you have a quorum at the meeting, it's 2/3 of those who are present and voting. Once they're adopted, they're immediately signed and dated by the president and the secretary, and immediately they become the current legal governing document for your PTA. Print out copies for every board member, double-sided, and you need to scan the fully signed signature page, not a picture with your camera, but a scan on your computer, save as a PDF, and then attach it to an email and send it to third district. That way we can insert it into the bylaws that we keep on hand. So we have a fully legally signed copy of your bylaws. So that's the last step, and please do not forget that. So basically, if you have questions or anything, contact me as the third district parliamentarian, and there's my email address. My cell phone number, and I'm happy to take calls, is 916-206-7658. Again, 916-206-7658. And that's our program. And so if you have any additional questions, I would be happy to take questions. I'm glad to see that everybody hung out and stayed with me. So you're free to unmute yourself if you have additional questions.
Hi, Sue. This is Tracy from Cordova Gardens.
Yes.
Thank you so much for that presentation. I have 2 questions. We can update our standing rules annually and probably should to reflect current meeting dates. Would we use that same e-bylaws program to do that? Or could we just...
Yes, you can. Or you can manually add standing rules. You'll notice at the bottom of the standing rules from the e-bylaws program, it tells you how you can vote to revise them, and you can vote to amend your standing rules by majority vote at any association meeting. So that's really easy.
Okay.
You don't have to send them through channels to get them approved. You only have to send them in each time you update the body of your bylaws too.
Okay.
But if you want us to know, us being third district, if you want us to have any additional bylaws or additional standing rules that you've added or change the wording on or whatever, once you do them, you write in whatever it is, initial and date it in the margin, and then again, take a scan of it and send it to third district so we can insert it. So we would have a current copy of your standing rules in the bylaws, the full bylaws that we keep on file.
Okay, thank you. And then just a general question about association meetings, and this may not be the right venue, but does it count that we did what we were supposed to do if we have association meeting, but we don't have a quorum? So we can't conduct any business, but we could say we had the meeting when we said we were going to have the meeting.
Right. And talk about things. You can't just make decisions. You can't spend money. So you could have a treasurer's report. You could talk about issues and things. But if you don't have a quorum, you can't vote to spend money. You can't vote to hold that the PTA is going to hold a school carnival on whatever the date is and everything. You can't take any legal action.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions? Well, if there are no other questions, things like that, thank you all so much for attending. I appreciate you spending part of your Saturday with us. And again, you can go to our third district website to see a recording of this, and you'll see copies of the slides and the handouts there. So thank you very much for being with us, and have a nice rest of your day.